The morning air was thick with the old familiar stinks of King's Landing. She breathed in the scent of sour wine, bread baking, fish rotting, and night soil, smoke and sweat and horse piss. No flower had ever smelled so sweet. The thoughts of Cersei Lannister, A Dance with Dragons, Chapter 65, Cersei 2. King's Landing grew from a small fishing village to a bustling port town to a huge city in a historical blink of an eye. Before long, the population of King's Landing overtook the likes of Goldtown, White Harbour and Lannisport, soon becoming the most populous city in the realm during the reign of King Jaehaerys I, the Conciliator. However, King's Landing never overtook Old Town in terms of sheer size. A factor often greatly overlooked in Westerosi history is that while King's Landing is indeed the largest city by population in Westeros, it is still much smaller than even some towns in Essos, such as Sewage and Voluntheris, let alone the free cities up and down the Narrow Sea. For a sense of scale, while there are no official numbers in terms of the populations of the cities of Westeros, Tyrion Lannister, who acted as Hand of the King during the events of the main book series, believed that the city had a population of approximately 500,000 people. The issue with how fast King's Landing grew was the lack of planning and forward thinking in its construction. By the time it had grown to the size of a proper city during the reign of King Jaehaerys I, the city itself was a mess of winding alleys and crisscrossing streets on top of one another. It made the city hard to navigate, with the spaces not utilised very well. More than that, however, when compared to the other cities of Westeros, King's Landing was more like a sprawling slum, and not the kind of place fit for the capital of the Seven Kingdoms and the seat of the king. This is something that King Jaehaerys Targaryen, the Conciliator, saw very clearly when he came of age in 50 AC, very much wanting to fix these issues, not just for the vanity of House Targaryen, but to improve the day-to-day lives of the small folk who called this mess of a city home. The first thing the king did was ensure the completion of Maegor the Cruel's Dragon Pit, a huge domed building up top Rhaenys' Hill, meant to house the Targaryen dragons while in King's Landing. Some did urge the king to abandon the project, given its negative connection to Maegor the Cruel, but given the sheer amount of gold and resources that had already been poured into its construction, Jaehaerys decided it was best to finish the construction on the Dragon Pit before moving on to the city proper. Jaehaerys had grand plans for the improvement, not just of King's Landing, but the Seven Kingdoms as a whole. And while the royal treasury did indeed have plenty of gold, Maegor's wars and instability had diminished it, and more would be required to achieve the full extent of the king's vision. Thus Jaehaerys turned to the Iron Bank of Braavos to gain the extra funds needed for his improved vision of Westeros. A significant portion of the city was demolished to make way for a new planned city layout that in theory would benefit all of the citizens of King's Landing. Due to the speed of its growth, King's Landing lacked the proper infrastructure of the other cities of Westeros, mostly basic amenities. Thus, the first thing the king installed was a brand new drainage and sewage system to carry waste from the city. Waste management had become a huge issue, with no easy way for the small folk to deal with it. The poorest parts of the city were nothing more than a disease-ridden slum. This new sewage system would prevent this, and in theory, this new King's Landing, from falling into the same state, rather than a network of tight alleys. Streets were widened, with main roads built crossing the whole city. Unlike the smaller streets, the roads were paved with cobblestones and lined with trees and greenery, with countless statues at intersections across the city, even in the poorer areas of King's Landing. In all, this made moving around the city a much more straightforward process. Regardless of the new sewage systems, King's Landing faced an issue all growing cities face sooner or later: a lack of clean drinking water. While King's Landing was located on the north bank of the Blackwater Rush, Septon Bath, the Hand of the King, correctly pointed out the river that was being used as the only source of clean drinking water for the city was a huge problem. Should something happen to it, the people of the city, rich or poor, would go thirsty. However, he was also greatly concerned about the quality of the river water, given how much sewage had already been dumped into it, stating it was only fit for swine and horses to drink from. Thus, many wells were sunk into the city, with even larger ones beyond the walls. Miles of glazed pipes and tunnels would then carry this fresh water into the heart of the city, where it would be housed in huge underground cisterns. This water would be made available at fountains and public squares in order to provide access to clean water to the small folk, free of charge. Much of this focus on providing the small folk with clean drinking water came from King Jaehaerys' sister wife, the good Queen Alysanne. Thus, these public fountains have become known as the Queen's Fountains. King Jaehaerys would fund one more large-scale project, not just to the benefit of King's Landing, but the Seven Kingdoms as a whole, by drastically improving the road network and connecting King's Landing to it directly. Not just making travel across the kingdoms easier, but boosting trade between the kingdoms and bringing the former independent Seven Kingdoms together as one, as Aegon the Conqueror had envisioned. Jaehaerys ordered the construction of the Gold Road and the Rose Road. The Gold Road would connect King's Landing to the west, starting from Lannisport and Casterly Rock. The Rose Road would travel south from King's Landing to Highgarden, where it would then connect to the ancient Ocean Road that travels all the way to Old Town. Finally, Jaehaerys would see the construction of the King's Road, the largest single road in the history of Westeros, extending for almost 2,000 miles from Storm's End through King's Landing to the Wall in the far north. Many of these ancient small pre-conquest roads that already existed would be connected to this huge King's Road. While not as large as the old Valyrian roads in Essos, this new road system with King's Landing at the heart surely did much in establishing it as the centre of Westeros since the conquest. By the end of King Jaehaerys' reign in 103 AC, King's Landing was not the same city it was when he came to the throne as a child, and had changed dramatically in only 50 years. It was now a place fit to be the seat of House Targaryen. By 103, the footprint of King's Landing is almost the same as it is in 298 AC, at the start of the main book series, with very few minor changes being made to the city layout in the time since. The Dance of the Dragons from 129 to 131 AC will see the dragon pit turned into a ruin, never to be repaired. To ensure food supply of not just King's Landing, but cities across Westeros during harsh winters or war, in 132 AC, Tywin Lannister, the Hand of the King, ordered construction of huge granaries in all of the major towns and cities in Westeros, with several large ones being constructed in King's Landing. The only other huge structural change King's Landing would see came between 161 and 171 AC, when King Baelor the Blessed ordered the construction of a huge sept on top of Rhaenys' Hill. This mighty construction project would later become known as the Great Sept of Baelor.